Welcome back to Martins and More. My name's Maury Rich.
And I'm Spoon Phillips.
And today's episode is brought to you by our Patreon members. Join our growing community for early access to every episode, exclusive video versions of the podcast, behind-the-scenes footage, full-length product demos, and more. We appreciate you. Isn't that right, Spoon?
Absolutely. Couldn't do it without you. So thanks for listening or watching for those of you who are able to see the video.
What do you want to talk about today, Spoon?
Well, somebody had asked me recently some gear questions at my website at onemans.com, and so I thought, I know we've done some gear episodes before, but it got me thinking about the evolution of what I use and in terms of live stage performance stuff. And so I was very curious as to what you currently use when it comes to your acoustic guitars. And I know you switch over to electric a lot when you're playing in the band situation. But what you currently use, how you, and kind of the journey that took you to where you are now with that. How's that?
Very, very interesting. And I probably should do some research before I nail myself to exact specifications going back more than 5-6 years ago. But I can certainly bring some information to the table on what I started with. And matter of fact, I just bumped into an old friend who was in town just for a few days from California. Lamar Snyder came back to Pennsylvania for a very short trip. And he and I started talking very briefly about the current state of acoustic guitar pickups, and we laughed at how much we used to think that throwing a $44 sound hole pickup, passive sound hole pickup in the sound hole of a guitar was it, and that's when we're done. That's all you have to do. Boy, were we wrong. But I'm sure everybody listening, or most people listening, might have either a horror story or just a funny story about when you figured out that you can amplify your acoustic guitar. Did you land on the first solution and think you were done? Did you get like Spoon and I and a lot of people on the forums and just never, ever stop trying to improve? But yes, I can at least tell you what I'm using this month, what I've been using for the past few years, and I can share some real honest stories about the very first time I took a guitar that wasn't meant to be loud and I plugged a sound hole pickup in it. But I should ask you the same thing. I know currently we can probably talk off air, and you and I probably have a decent idea what each other uses, but let me ask you this way. When is the last time you played acoustically where you had to actually plug in? And then we'll talk about what you use later.
Oh, well, I just played at my annual St. Patrick's Day gig with the Highland Shatners at Freddie's Back Room in Brooklyn. So, and unfortunately, that was disastrous because the very nice person who was doing the sound was running what was basically an open mic and had their PA set up totally incorrect. So we ran into lots of problems because what I was using in my guitar was so hot that it completely overloaded, and we didn't have time to worry about it. So I ended up having to borrow what was basically her plastic guitar and play the entire gig through that. So that was the way it goes. But it was fine. We got some. People took little videos and stuff, and you could hear me if not well enough. But yeah, we figured out that she had the main gains way up, so everything was at like less than 1, and it just wasn't working in terms of the instrument plugins. So yeah, lesson learned there. But that was fun. It was fine.
And did you say annual? Does that mean you waited a whole year to go back and do that gig, and that's what you got?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, we've played Freddie's for over 20 years on St. Patrick's Day, except for the two COVID years. But when we did some online video stuff instead, which was fun, like remote stuff where different people were in different locations, and I just put it all together and put it online. But
nice.
But yes, indeed.
I can't say that thing doesn't happen to me, but at least we have next week to fix it. If we have a terrible situation, it's usually not more than 9 or 10 days until we get to play again. So if I have a bad taste in my mouth after a gig, I don't wait, my God, a whole year to get back there.
Well, yeah, I mean, we try to play 2 or 3 times a year probably, but we always do Freddie's on St. Patrick's Day. So that was the most recent live gig. What about yours?
Next time I'm in town, I'm gonna pull Freddie aside and we're gonna have a word with him. So I'll fix it for you. So. Did I guess right? Is there a Freddie?
There was a Freddie. He was an ancient retired police officer who owned that building that Freddie's was in originally and lived above it. And it's now the center stage of the old Freddie's is now where you played with Jim Monahan way back when. That was Freddie's. And it's now the bicycle rack at the basketball arena at Atlantic Center. So it was torn down, and it was literally ground zero of the old resistance movement. People were literally chaining themselves to the door and that kind of stuff when they tore down that neighborhood to build the arena. But it worked out because the manager and the employees got the blessing of Freddie to use the name, and it took them a couple of years, but they found a much bigger, better place that has a full kitchen and, to do burgers and tater tots and all that, and a bigger back room. So it worked out in the long run, but it's in a totally different neighborhood, so it's not a walking distance for me anymore, but oh well.
Nice. Well, I didn't mean to dodge your question. My last gig was just last week, and as we're taping this, I have a gig tonight with Tim and tomorrow with Tim. So I have it in my mind every time we go and play. I don't know if you get the same way, but I'm as interested in getting a great acoustic tone as much as I am in playing and singing. And if I can come back and see somebody shared a video about us on Facebook, and it sounds really good, like the tone's really good, that makes me more happy probably than if we got every song perfect. And conversely, the opposite is so true. If we have a great time and I see a video and it sounds horrible, it's very rare. I mean, it's sometimes the mix isn't up to what it should be, but I certainly, I'm 4 hours away from playing tonight and I'm already thinking about what I'm going to sound like. And then when we start playing, then I think about what we're going to do. So I probably put things in the reverse order, but I do have the luxury of probably playing 5 or 6 times a month these days. And it goes in swings. I haven't done a lot in the wintertime, but now that the weather's getting nice, between the band and the duo, and in the occasional solo show that I do up here at the Mansion House in Summit Hill, on average, if I have a good night or a bad night, there isn't much time between one or the other. So it's been a lot of fun. And if I look back on how much fun I have, at this job, a lot of it really is being able to take all this talking all day long about Martin guitars and pickups and preamps and gear, and then being able to use it. I don't know what I would do if I had to talk to other people and get them off and running all the time and not be able to enjoy it myself. I think I'd really be bummed out. So it's a lot of fun, especially if it's a good crowd and a good night.
Yeah, and so you're performing where? The VFW Hall?
Not this time. We have. Don't count that out. It's been a long time since Tim and I did play the VFW or
I remember that. That's why I mentioned it. But where are you actually playing?
We're going to play a place called Oro's in Jim Thorpe. It's on Broadway in the tourist district, if I call it that. And the other word for the VFW is the VF Dubs. And of course, you have to be my brother to call it that. But yeah, I think he was there last time you were there, and we certainly will. We're looking forward to getting back there someday. But tonight's place is really, really unusually small. If you walk in and set everything up, you can't put your arms out like this and then turn in any direction without punching everybody in the audience, which is nothing we try to do anyway. But it's always a good time, and I'm gonna kind of like mail it in right now during the podcast because all I'm thinking about is playing my guitar later and my Trance Audio pickup. But I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse. Why don't you go first and tell us a little bit about do you want to go all the way back to the beginnings, or how do we do a routine history of what you're playing?
That's a good question. Do we start where I'm at now, or basically? I started out in New York City wanting to play through microphones exclusively, particularly if I was playing solo stuff. But in a band situation, my first real band was called the Cheese Beads, which was named by a 10-year-old girl whose mother ran the place that we played at here in this neighborhood in Brooklyn. And it was kind of a mix. A lot of original tunes, but some of them had come from previous bands that various band members were in. A lot of rock and roll stuff. We would do the occasional cover, sometimes relatively send-up covers, like It's Not Unusual, the Tom Jones song, or Dancing Queen, or which we always got requests for, or Kung Fu Fighting. So it's people used to call us Speed Lounge. We had all kinds of people who named us in all kinds of odd ways. But it was fun, and people thought they were going to get Peter, Paul, and Mary because it was 3 acoustic guitars and a bass and a singer, and eventually a percussionist who then eventually went to full drums. But my guitar, which at that time was a Kahn knockoff of a 0018, it actually went through one of those full all-in-one pedal boards that had overdrive, distortion, delay, chorus, reverb, and compressor, and flange, and there were times when we really we did a medley of TV themes of Maude and the Jeffersons, and then we would end with All in the Family. But the All in the Family we did in a big, growly E minor sort of Neil Young, Pink Floyd thing where I would have these screaming, David Gilmour solos and all that stuff. So it was great fun. And
All in the Family at Pompeii.
No, I wish I would have thought about that back then. Yeah, we had great fun. And actually, I'm assuming by the time this airs, there's going to be a brief clip of one of my guitar solos from that era on that little short scale acoustic guitar, so you can hear what I'm talking about in terms of the wah-wah pedal and all that kind of stuff. It was. I had to learn to keep my palm on the bass E string so it wouldn't go wah, and just completely feed out in some of the smaller places we played. So it became a technique to use that use that feedback as necessary. But there's definitely, in fact, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I had gotten a deep tissue massage once because of some problems with my shoulder years ago. And that person dug into my left shoulder in here. And I've always heard about people who are rolfed, that it's bringing out all these terrible repressive memories and stuff. And it was as if I instantly fell asleep and had about a 5-second dream, but it was actually a real muscle memory of being on stage at the Space and Chase, which used to be on 3rd Avenue in the East Village. I was standing in front of the monitors to keep from feeding back. And it was so hot in there. I think I was playing without a shirt on, and the place was absolutely packed. We used to, in those days, people, we would just absolutely pack people into these rooms. So, and I was playing a solo to "Sweet Child of Mine." It wasn't on that guitar because I needed a cutaway. So we had we used to borrow this little plastic Ibanez that had a cutaway just for that song, and then later for Bohemian Rhapsody. But yeah, I mean, it was literally like I was reliving that memory, and then I suddenly was back in the massage room. Really freaked me out. But anyway, that was back then. Once I discovered people like Maury Rutch and got into Martin guitars and all that sort of thing, and got on the forums, and I went through the long, twisted, dark woods that where I lost my way, as Dante would have put it, and into all kinds of stuff. I bought all kinds of pickups. I tried I had a Sunrise for a while because that's what everybody was using back then. Michael Hedges and Leo Kottke and all that. Those things are super hot and they're just useless in a very small room, coffee house environment. They're just so high powered. And I used the Rare Earth, the Baggs Rare Earth, and I used maybe it was the Rare Earth. I also used the other bags that Jackson Browne and Bonnie Raitt were famously beta testers for. That was supposed to be the new be-all, end-all, and all of those electric sound hole pickups all, to me, sounded like electric guitar pickups, really compared to that. So I always wanted to try to use mics whenever possible. There was a time back when you and I first met, and you were just in business, and you sold the original Aura pedal, the Fishman Aura pedal that had 50 preset choices, and they originally had designed it for you to be able to plug in a bunch of different guitars and not have to be able to switch from one guitar to the other and just go to your preset and have a finger style setting for it and a strumming style setting, so you could basically have 25 guitars preset. They gave you a lot of presets, but you could also make your own. And that actually came from Mars Music in Coaldale, Pennsylvania. And it was a pretty big pedal. I don't have a picture of it anymore, but maybe you could stick a picture in there at some point. And it was pre-USB, so you had to use MIDI for it to connect to a computer. And I remember, and in those days, you could send your guitar to Fishman, and they would make a custom image. And so I had the first Schoenberg soloist, Brazilian Rosewood, with this outrageous Sitka waterfall bear claw top. That was the first Schoenberg soloist with pearl inlay that was sold to me by a fan of my music for a bargain basement price. And I eventually sold that to Chris Martin for his private collection because he didn't actually have a Schoenberg in his collection. So I got a custom guitar out of that and some cash. But I had sent that to Fishman, and they made me the exclusive, Aura. I don't know why this light keeps going off. They made me the Aura image for that guitar. So I included the disc that went with that. So that's now in Chris Martin's private collection. But and you would load that in your Aura pedal. And those only worked with undersaddle pickups, though. So that's when I converted to using the Fishman undersaddle pickups and stayed with those, the Gold Line and Gold Line Plus, and those pickups for years. And because I liked the Aura technology, I eventually got the small Aura box. We have a photo of that. Aura came out with little boxes, one designed for dreadnoughts, and jumbos, one designed for OMs and for like triple O's and double O's. And so I had the OM. I still have that pedal, and I did like it a lot. I thought it worked very well for undersaddle pickups, and you could get away with the bridge plate pickups and stuff, but you couldn't use the Aura at all. You'd have to use just the bare signal, but they still, I don't think, sounded as good as an undersaddle pickup. But so I still have that in my collection. But I then, when I started playing mainly solo in New York City, I went back to microphones and would always have a pickup in the guitar, but I would have the sound man set the microphone and make the microphone the real sound, and then just bring up the pickup just enough to fill it out. And that seemed to work very well for quite a while. But that would basically require me to sit. I couldn't move around, so I wouldn't do that when I'm playing with people. And then I guess, and from that point, I moved into, I had basically stopped playing electric guitars. I played them for a time in the later era of the Cheese Beads. But I primarily played acoustic guitars. And it wasn't until I started playing for Paul Ukina Jr. Paul Ukina, some of you are familiar with, was on Broadway and in regional theater for a quarter of a century. And his dad was the principal baritone at City Opera, and his mom was a piano teacher, but a very gifted singer, baritone, and very gifted guitarist. And he, after he retired from being an actor, he got he discovered the unofficial Martin guitar forum, and it revived his interest in playing music again. And he asked me and Frank Krupet to be his sidemen in a trio here for a long time. So I switched to the K&K pickups and the Red Eye preamp because that's what they used, and I figured it would be easier for soundmen if we were all using the same thing. And so I switched to the K&K bridge plate sensors, and the Red Eye is a very powerful preamp that I love it because it has a solo button built in. It's got a stomp button built in. It has an onboard balanced SLR out, so you can go SLR to the board, and it's got two jacks, so you can go through a loop. Mm-hmm. And it's got a volume for the boost as well, so you can actually adjust the volume on the boost in addition to the volume of the pedal, and it seems to work very well with those kind of bridge plate sort of pickups. So I still have that. I still use that. And again, I will use that in combination with mics, but there's times when I'll still just use a mic now. I was very honored when Dick Boak asked me to be the entertainment at his first New York City show of his artwork, his pointless artwork, and that Matty Humanoff had hosted that at the site of his old shop that he rents out for those kind of occasions and still owns. But so that was very exciting. But in that, I just used a single. I just have the small. I'm trying to think what model it is, but the small diaphragm mic from. Oh, for heaven's sakes! What's the main German mic maker that makes the U180 whatever? Radio
Shack?
Yeah, that's it. Oh, come on. But anyway, yes,
Neumann?
I have a very good Neumann. Thank you. The Neumann, yeah, the Neumann 102 or 105 or whatever, the small. I have a pair of those, but that's what I tend to use in solo gigs these days. I don't tend to record with those. I have a pair of Octavas, the Russian mic.
Okay.
But Michael Jolly hot-wired them, so they basically have entirely different guts and an entirely different capsule. But he was in the business for a long time of taking those kind of mics and upgrading them. So they sound more like Neumanns, and that's what I use to record with.
A lot of the things you just talked about have pictures with them. So if you're a Patreon friend of ours, you're seeing on the left side of the screen the Fishman Aura pedal, not the original Big Behemoth, but the more streamlined version. And the right-hand side is that Red Eye. And I can't exactly tell in the picture, but it looks like the boost is all the way up, and it's taped there. How do your friends feel about you being so loud in the mix? Should I call Paul?
I only turned it that way so you could see it without the tape. The tape was there so I could remember which on a dark stage under red light or whatever, I can remember which knob was which. And I think the tape might actually be set at my preferred boost. But I turned it around so you couldn't see the ugly blue tape.
Well, my joke's not as funny now that you clarified that, but I thought of saying it anyway. And then we're going to go to another slide. This is the DoD Overdrive Preamp FX50. I'm sure that distortion is all the way to the top. And there's also a Boss Super Chorus. Spoon, explain yourself. This is, I'm not sure what year this was, but this screams late 1980s. Let me know if I'm wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I think I must have gotten these in 1989. That's maybe not, maybe 1990. So, but yeah, the Cheese Big's first gig was Easter Sunday, 1990. So those were part of that. And I used those before I bought the big, relatively inexpensive, one of those big all-in-one plastic pedal board things. And I had that for a very long time. And then I think I may have given it or sold it to a former, guitar student of mine at some point. But I kept those others because they come in handy. They still come in handy when I need to. Once I do this funny little song that I used to make CDs for children when they were typically when they're 6 years old, and I would do a thing and I'd put on Octopus's Garden and Yellow Submarine and some of the stuff from the Roaches Children's album. But I always took this one song and that would mention the kid's name and mention things about them, and I would just change it around to different kids. And so I'd always have to put on some sort of rock and roll guitar solo on it and when I would re-record it. And so I always kept the overdrives and stuff like that for the sake of special effects.
Nice. And it was low-hanging fruit for me to pick on you about that, but I will stand corrected and say that I've actually done the same. There are a couple of tunes that the Churchills play when it's me and Tim with our bass player and our drummer, and some of the songs we do really could go either way. I could play acoustic or electric on it, and one night, I forget why, but I was still playing the acoustic, and we don't usually go with a set list, so somebody shouted out a song name. I didn't want to put the guitar down and switch, so I just played the song on acoustic, and Tim looked at me, you got to play the solo in this. No. And he gave me this big, he's not afraid to tell me how the song should be as far as the instrumentation. I said, I got this. And he said, all right, fine. And I think it was a Doobie Brothers tune, like a deep cut. And I played a solo with my Martin Ohm 28V and my pickup and just a little bit of a distortion. It wasn't enough that you would know that's what it was, but it certainly took the unaffected sound and gave it enough gain and sustain. And after that song, he he did the Silvio, like, I'm okay with it now. And it really, I mean, anybody listening might have some experience with it. If you take your acoustic guitar sound and put it through a distortion pedal or an overdrive pedal, and just enough to taste, it's not that you have to mimic a humbucker or an electric guitar and anything really heavy. It could certainly take a signal that was a little bit too strident or too thin and give it a lot of muscle. And if you're careful enough, like I was, or like I try to be, you don't necessarily know that it's distortion. It's just, it's got more muscle behind it. And I have to think you did some of that with that pedal, but with it turned all the way up, I think I might have been right the first time I looked at it. So.
Well, that may have been for some sort of special effect, or I may have, I don't know, put some WD-40 in at one point and was wiggling them around just to, get them to work better. I don't know. But I don't remember ever playing with it on full over. But it's possible I was experimenting. It's definitely possible.
Well, I let you go on long enough, and I didn't answer your original question, or at least I didn't give it enough detail. These days, what I'm playing, I'll go back from present towards past. I have a Trance Audio Amulet M in my OM28V, and that's the bridge plate version of the dual mono version of that famous pickup that came out in the early 90s. As a matter of fact, they're hitting one of their anniversaries. It might be, 1994 to 2024? Is that 40 years? Or 30 years? Somebody do that math for me.
Yeah, so it's 30 years. Yeah.
Wow. So Trance Audio is proudly hitting their 30-year anniversary. They have some good stuff on Instagram recently. But they originally came out with a stereo pickup that only really went mono. Maybe 10 years ago now, they came out with the dual mono version. So long story short, that's what I have in my OM28V. I run that through a Radial PZ Deluxe, and part of the attraction is similar to what Spoon was saying. It's got the boost function on it. It's got a regular bass, middle, and treble, and the mid-range is sweepable, so you can find whatever frequency you want to boost or cut, and it gives you a lot of flexibility there. Ironically, unless I'm in a very strange-sounding room, the bass is almost always on 12 o'clock or 1, and then I typically use the treble control to make up for or not. If my strings are brand new, I'm usually fine. If I have strings that are starting to die, I might actually dial in a little bit of treble, or in a rare case, if the room's too bright, I might put that at anywhere between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, but nothing really surgical. And then I feed that to, we have the Bose, if you're familiar with the Bose tower systems, we have the Bose Pro 32, I think it's called L1 Pro 32. And what that does, it gives us the flexibility to have the tower of the speakers behind us, and it acts as a monitor and front of house. And the most recent versions of those things, they're really interesting. If you look at a tower up close, it's 24 tiny little speakers, and this one's aimed over there. The one above it is aimed the opposite, and it's just a column that you can literally walk almost behind it, definitely to the side of it, and it fills the room with a pretty even tone. It's only a little bit brighter if you're really exactly in the front of it, and it's so surreal, but if you stand right where we are and walk away, you have to go more than 20 or 30 feet to hear any volume difference. So the back of the room hears the same thing as the front of the room. So really that's, in a nutshell, it's my guitar signal into the radial, into the Bose, and if I do anything with effects, sometimes if we have to go through a bigger mixer, if the Churchills are playing, we'll go through a 24-channel board. And when I have the opportunity, sometimes I'll put a little bit of delay on it. But as much as I want to sound really critical and really that I think far ahead of what I'm doing, sometimes I just forget to even unmute that channel as far as the effects. So I do run a pretty dry sound. I love the sound of reverb when I'm doing a sound check, but as soon as the band starts up, that kind of thing kind of gets washed away. So I go for a very wooden, transparent sound when I can, and except for that one story I told you minutes ago about having a little bit of dirt on my sound, I definitely don't go for that. I don't go for chorus or anything that's really wet. And if you heard our band and everybody stopped and I kept playing, what I want to sound like is my acoustic guitar unplugged. I don't want to have any literal extra definition. And of course that's it's such a talking point these days, my guitar only louder. I don't have that per se, but I really feel like when I'm playing the Trance Audio, it combines the immediacy of an undersaddle pickup with the resonance of a bridge plate sound. So it has enough attack and it's fast. It's not mushy. It's not overly ambient. It doesn't sound like a microphone inside the guitar, but it definitely has a lot of wooden characteristics. And all I have to do is bring it home and play it through an amp and then unplug it and quickly plug in any undersaddle sound. And sometimes you're not sure what you're hearing until you compare it to the opposite. And as soon as you play an undersaddle pickup, especially with a bright pick, especially down by the bridge, it reminds me exactly how microphonic's not the right word, but how warm the trance audio does sound without sounding fake, really.
I think that's very true. I remember doing a thing that I was in Rolling Stone long ago, and talking about Neil Young's setup and what Larry Craig was saying about his setup. And this was back when the trance just first started. And I always thought the sound they got out of Neil Young's D45 and D28 on MTV Unplugged was really outstanding for it basically being a pickup. I mean, there may be some microphone up above him somewhere that you don't see on camera, but I don't think so. And so I was, I always was very interested in their products. That being said, having seen him here recently at the Basketball Arena Atlantic Center in modern times, not very recently, but his acoustic guitars sounded terrible. They sounded really thin and really harsh and brappy, and
wow.
So it is as good as a pickup can be. It's the whole chain that matters when it comes to public performances, and when you're in big arenas, there's only so much you can do because you're totally at the mercy of the person mixing the sound.
Wow.
There's so many people. I've heard so many people. I've heard Leo Kottke and Steve Earle and all these different people talking about how sound men are always mixing acoustic guitars too bright, and acoustic guitars aren't supposed to be a bright instrument. You have treble up there and harmonics up there that take care of that, but they're not supposed to be a bright sounding instrument. And that for some reason, there's a lot of professional sound people out there that in this age of rock and roll that don't seem to understand that. So, but that being said, you have to start, the first part of the chain. If you have a bad pickup, if you have a mediocre pickup or a crappy pickup, there's nothing else you can do about it, really. There's only so much you can do about it anyway. So, and you've been now playing that for how long?
I would say at least 8 years, maybe 10. As soon as they came out, as soon as they were rumored to come out, my radar was, I got to find out about this. And I was lucky enough that when they did hit the market, I reached out to Gary and Laurel, and I said, would you mind if I buy one, and if I like it enough, can I be a dealer for you? And he said, well, we'll talk. And he was very amenable to me, and we had a really nice, long introductory conversation, super nice people to talk with. And I expressed to them, I want to basically become your East Coast installer, and I want as soon as I heard what they sounded like, I wanted to be somebody that his customers could go to, whether it was a combination of online ordering, and I'd walk people through how to do it, or, just recently, as yesterday, you and I were talking about testing this program.
Sorry about that.
And if we would have gone too long yesterday, I would have had to take a 5-minute break, because a customer of ours that you probably might even remember his name, I won't say it on camera in case he wants to be private, but he was one of the people at our initial grand opening back in 2003. And then he ended up coming back and he bought one of the UMGF model guitars. And fast forward through a long story, he sent me his guitar from Pittsburgh. And he said, put a Trance Audio Amulet M in it, and I'll let you know if I pick it up or if I have it shipped. He drove out 4.5 hours, came in, we spent a really nice 5 minutes, and then he had to get back on the road to be off the road within 9 hours. This is like, I don't want to be gone more than 10 hours, so I can't stay. But I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be somebody who, if it's within shipping distance or if you're patient enough to make the trip, I want to be somebody people consider when you buy a Trance Audio and or have it installed. So I think it's almost 10 years, but it's one of those things I'm really, really proud of. And there are some conversations that I've had with that company over the years. As a matter of fact, as recent as a few months ago, that they just get it. They're a very, very small company. I don't know if they've ever made an effort to become mainstream or chase LR Baggs or Fishman. They've never seemed like that to me. But if you look at the who's who of playing these things, the most recent list I could think of is Paul Simon got on board a couple years ago, Jackson Browne, Neil Young, Sheryl Crow, and a lot of the artists I think that are almost at that level kind of hear about this system more from people on the road than from advertisements or certainly in a music store. So I'm thrilled to have found them. I still think there's a place for Fishman, LR Baggs, and a lot of the other companies, and a lot of really, really great pickups sound excellent in 2024. Don't let this podcast episode sound a little bit demeaning or degrading to anybody that's not something we mention. The only thing that I have on my radar these days that I haven't played yet, the LR Baggs Hi-Fi and now the Hi-Fi Duet, the version of it with a mic. I haven't heard those in person, and I expect I would like them. So I want to try them and see what they seem like in the real world. But the Trance hasn't had anybody beat it yet since I've been playing it. Like for me, for what I do.
Yeah, I want to see those too. You mentioned your Bose. I forgot to mention that I have a Trace Elliot 35 watt 2-channel Trace Elliot that the TA35 CE, I think it's called. That's got a multi-band equalizer and an effects array knob with various reverbs and chorus. And this is one of the original ones that was actually made in England, and I've had that for a zillion years. Unfortunately, now, every time you turn one of the knobs, the volume knobs on either channel, it crackles like a shortwave radio in a thunderstorm.
Aww.
But so I've never, looked into having somebody figure out how to fix that. I'm sure there's some way to fix that, but I've had that for years. That's what I've typically used in my solo gigs, and like when I played that show for Dick Boak and Steve Earle, he was there, so I can say I played for Steve Earle. And,
wow.
He, as he was leaving, he went by and he said, "Sup?" So I guess that was his nod of approval.
Nice.
But yeah, so I still have that, and I don't have to use it very often. I would these days only use it in those kind of situations. I use it to test things here, so I have something to plug into. But yeah, here in New York, I'm always going through a direct box into a PA, so it's never, I don't tend to play through amps. So here, and it's certainly nice when you get monitors, which you don't always get. But well, that's very cool. But so you've been playing that for about 8 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but I do remember you going through a series of things yourself in the past. And did you go down? Well, you guys were actually playing the Aura guitars for a while, the Aura models, when they had Aura models. You and Tim were playing those in concert, and those sounded very good. I mean, I like the Aura sound. Some people find it a little too trebly, but I think. I wouldn't say they sound like an acoustic guitar. They sound more like an acoustic guitar coming through a mic. That's how they sound to me. They sound like you're hearing an acoustic guitar coming through a mic, and it still, sounds somewhat processed. But for plug and play ease, I was perfectly happy when I played the SC18. At the factory, when they came out at NAMM, that one had the LR Baggs system in it, and I got to play that briefly through a Fishman acoustic. No, it wasn't Fishman. Maybe it was a Fender acoustic amp, and it sounded good. It sounded fine. I was pleased with what it sounded like, but I would have liked to have compared it directly with the Aura, but maybe someday.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's not necessarily the benchmark. To go by a video and go by what the somebody's sound is on a video, a direct recording. But I'm not sure if I shared this with you or if you saw it at NAMM as well. The guys from Anderton's TV in England, they did their whole thing from the Martin booth. And at one time, I should see if I could find this again, I think one of them played the SC18E or the SC28E, but it was the Fishman version with the brand new, the most recent updated. They're updating that Fishman Aura HD all the time. Whatever the most recent 2024 update is, that thing was hands down, to my memory, the very best sounding direct recording where somebody took a guitar, plugged it into the video. There's no speaker, there's no microphone, there's no ambient sound. It's just what the pickup sounds like direct to disc. That thing sounded incredibly amazing. And of course, when I got to Martin, I think the examples they had on display for the NAMM time, either they were both LR Baggs anthems or they didn't have an amp there. So I didn't get to do it myself, and that we're on the list to get a hold of those guitars and do a proper review in the studio. But I could take everything I say about Trance Audio and throw it away if that thing ends up sounding like I think it's going to sound. That might totally hook me. And there's something about the R that sounds a little bit it sounds better than it feels. Like I know you talked about in different podcast episodes, there's a micro delay where the feel of a processed pickup, when you strum, it's not an immediate reaction where it doesn't feel the same like a tube amp versus solid state. But when I hear videos of me playing Aura guitars or other people, I'm more appreciative of the way they sound than the way I'm making them sound in the moment. If I was going to choose a pickup system based on what the video is going to look like later, I might put them almost at the top, but there's something a little bit off about the experience doing it. And I don't know if that's a fair shake, but that's how I think of the Aura these days until that new one.
Well, that's part of what the Aura was about. The algorithm is really quite ingenious, and for people who are not familiar with the technology, they, at least going back to the original building up of the Aura, they basically would record a guitar with a high-end microphone. And they would use multiple high-end microphones and then decide. And originally, you would have multiple mics. Now they just pick one, and it could be any brand of mic, but they're always like high-end studio microphones, and they record the wave direct from the pickup, and then they take it into what's basically a laboratory. They cut that recording up into like 1,000 little slivers, and they massage the EQ of the Aura image, as they call it, of the wave file to match the microphone's wave. But then the onboard computer has this real-time adjustment. And you can fool it. You can go from soft to hard real quick, and it'll take a second or two to kind of catch up to your attack. But it's actually really, particularly if you play steady, like if you're playing fingerstyle, that's what makes it sort of sound like a microphone, the micro delay. It's basically giving you the micro delay time it takes for the sound of the sound wave coming out of the sound hole to hit the diaphragm of the microphone. And that's why some of them are far away mic images and some of them are real close mic images. And then they allowed you to decide which one you liked best. Nowadays, they don't do that. You just get one image and it's on the guitar. Chris Martin, I think they were at the Frankfurt show, and he turned to Dick Boak one day and he said, "Explain to me again why we have to have 50 images on the guitar." And Dick said, "Well, because we can, And when they went out, by the time they got to the Aura onboard Aura models and the retro models that had Aura images of real vintage Martins and all that, I think you got 8 choices. You were down to 8 mic choices, and all of which were customizable originally. But again, then they went, apparently Chris just listened to the professional musicians who didn't like having holes cut in guitars and didn't like having knobs in guitars, and so now you just get one image, you just plug into it, and other than the wheel, the sweep wheel inside, the tone wheel that's inside with the volume wheel, you just get the one image. But I think they sound pretty amazing, and I'm a little worried now that you told me that about the Fishman Aura on the SC models, because I'm really trying not to buy the SC18E.
Too bad.
Frankly, if I was performing more, I don't perform that much these days. Maybe if I can ever retire one of these days, I can go back to playing, 5 to 6 times a month like you do. But I think it would be an ideal guitar. They're so comfortable. I would really probably only use it, even though I have to say I was just watching your program yesterday where you were doing your inventory and you played those two. I was very impressed with the sound of those SE models, including the SE10 and the SE13E. I was really impressed with how they sound, almost to the point that if I was going to play it exclusively plugged in, I might consider the much more affordable SC10E for playing coffeehouse gigs and like restaurant acoustic solo instrumental stuff, as opposed to the 18. But boy, I'd sure like to have that 18.
It's so cliche to say that if you can play any SC and you can reach a certain tier with your wallet, get the 1828, you probably should. But boy, is it unfair to put the SC10E or the SC13E special or the SC13E original in a lesser camp. I have played them way too many times to tell you that they're lesser. There are certainly players that I know that I respect that if you brought them here next week and said play the SC10, play the SC18E, play the SC10E Sapele, and pick one blindfold, they would hear the difference and they would know one is a Koa back and sides and one is Rosewood. But they are way too much guitar for the money. And I'll go so far as to say, even just tonally, if they didn't play that way, if they made some change at Martin and the SC models didn't have low action or the fast neck, and they weren't revolutionary, and they did have a neck heel, and they still sounded like they sound, people would still buy them over a Road Series GPC or a Road Series Triple O. I mean, they're in the Road Series, but there is too much tone on the SCs for having a neck that you can actually take the neck off of those guitars in 10 seconds. They should not sound that good.
Well, and they're comfortable. The 13 fret design allows you to have long scale string tension, but it feels like a short scale guitar because everything is just a little closer to your body, and so your wrist angle and all that stuff is not quite as severe when you're out in the first position, and you don't run into the traffic jams if you're playing up in a cutaway like I always do, and that's the one drawback I have of playing short scale guitars is the frets are so close together up in the cutaway area. But conversely, they're not as close together down in the first position, and for someone who doesn't have particularly long fingers, that can be a problem when you're trying to do those big stretches. But anyway, we're kind of off because neither of us actually play those guitars right now. You get to play them all the time right now, but they're not really part of my performance rig. But maybe they will be. Because they're just ergonomics and all that sort of stuff really matters as you get older, and I'm starting to get tendonitis that I haven't had in over 10 years, and it's kind of creeping back on me. So that has more to do with using the computer too much than playing guitar too much, unfortunately. But
same here.
I think a lot of people go through, just like the people from the Unofficial Modern Guitar Forum and Acoustic Guitar Magazine's forum and the other forums, that go on a journey, get swept up, get greatly influenced by influencers, and they go through all kinds of guitars, all kinds of pickups, all kinds of saddles, all kinds of picks. But then eventually some of them continue to do that because they love to do that. And they want something new. Others, they finally find either what works for them or is good enough. And for somebody like me, my system is good enough because I am much more interested in playing unplugged or playing through a mic whenever possible. And so we've jettisoned a lot of the stuff, and we basically use what we like. And we're not alone. Yeah. There are still people out there playing a Sunrise sound hole pickup to this day. David Lindley, who's unfortunately no longer with us, he kept us. He had Sunrise in his Weissenborn's style instruments. He stuck with what he liked. And Leo Kottke, I think, had 3 pickups in his, and by price still does. And he would switch. He could just go in and switch from the Sunrise to something else based on the room. He would basically go in, and in a sound check, he would decide which pickup he thought worked best in that arena or that auditorium or whatever. That is a big regret of mine. I came very close to getting a Leo Kottke 12-string signature model from on eBay that had a 2 dual source with a Sunrise and an undersaddle and 2 plugs in it. And cool. So you could have separate, feet, which is a very David Lindley thing to do. And in fact, Kottke got the idea from Lindley. He said that Lindley always called it his bigger-than-life sound. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe David got the idea from Leo, and one of them said, the person referred to it as the bigger-than-life sound, because you'd have 2 separate feeds. And I don't know if you can do this with your dual mono source, but you have 2 separate feeds to 2 amps that are purposely set at different distances on stage or something like that, so they're not arriving at the listener's ears at the exact same time. Which then gives a bigger sound to it, apparently. But I've never gotten into that stuff that much, and I'm glad I live a very simple plug and play life now with the K&Ks, as far as I'm concerned. But
Yeah, it's cool. We got to see David Lindley at the Opera House in Jim Thorpe years ago, and for sound check, he was playing his Weissenborn, and it must have been the front of house plus his amp on stage, and then either he said it or the engineer said it. All right, now the sub, and it went. It was just gigantically beautiful. It wasn't howling. It was as if 25 bass players like looked at each other and played the E and the A strings. And I think you told me a long time ago on his Weissenborn, like the bass E was some kind of tree trunk size.
70, yeah, it was a 70. Yeah. He had told me that he had them specially ordered and played. But because it sounded, when you see him at the bottom line here, somebody said to me he must be triggering a bass synth, and so I actually sent him an email, and he wrote me back saying no, I just use a 70, but that's when he mentioned that. So maybe it was him mentioning Leo Kottke. That he said that's what Kottke always called it. He said I got that from Leo Kottke, and he called it bigger than life, the bigger than life sound. But having the dual source go to different amps and different settings on the different amps, and something about having them having the maybe it was the one on the floor and the one up above in that room. They would arrive to your ears just slightly different, and it would kind of with a slight delay on one of them or something to that effect. But I don't remember now. That was a long time ago. But
that's pretty neat. Would you say that was like 20 years ago?
Yeah, I would probably. I'm trying to think. It was when he was touring with Wally Ingram, and prior to that it was Hanny Nazar, and I'm not sure which percussionist was with him at the time of that show. It would have been Wally, so it was after the Hanny years, but I don't remember. But that the person leaned over to me and said he's got to be using a bass synth. But
try that again. 20 years.
20 years goes by in a hurry, sort of like a game of 20 questions.
Thank you. I don't care when you saw him.
It's making you work for it.
Yeah. 20 questions.
That's right. This is the game, 20 questions, where one of us asks the other 20 questions to try to guess a Martin guitar that is currently for sale, and the other has to think up a model, which I'm trying to do right now. Uh-huh. Thinking. And,
you had a week.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I have it. So Mari, the smart guy, gets to guess 20 questions to figure out the guitar that the wise guy, which is me, has in his mind, and he can guess up to 3 models that count toward the 20 questions, and 20 questions are on the clock now.
Is this guitar made in Navajo, Mexico?
No.
Is this guitar a dreadnought?
Yes. Yes, that's a yes.
Is this guitar made with a spruce top?
Yes.
Does this guitar cost less than $2,000?
These days, I will have to say no, definitely no.
Does this guitar have mahogany back and sides?
No.
Does this guitar have pearl anywhere on the top?
No.
Does this guitar have plastic binding?
Yes.
Does this guitar have herringbone?
No.
Does this guitar have a 2-piece back?
Technically, you could say that, but because it's got at least 2 pieces. So, but no, it doesn't.
Nasty. Is this a D35?
It is a D35. which was the same one you had last week, and I believe I guessed it in fewer questions.
Now it's a contest, right? Wow, that was a kind of... Was that tricky or was that lazy?
Well, I thought you would think I wouldn't go with that because you just went with it. But
you're right. 10 questions ago, you'd be right. That took me too long. I really thought you were going to pick an acoustic electric. You don't really follow themes that well. Not that there's instructions, but like I think the episode we did about bassist, I did bass.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, I was between that and the SC13E Special Burst.
Was it really? Wow.
But I thought, no, for the moment, if I thought we just talked about that, so you'd probably go through the SCs the moment you started asking about Mexico. So, but
and I tried to find out, is there a way to figure out what series it is faster by picking price points? Because if it's less than $2,000, I could skip, 4 or 5 of the top stuff, but that didn't help as much as you think it might. So that was fun. I did good.
I agree. Congratulations. Well, maybe for some other times, like when I stump you, you need to get the sound effect of the villagers in Son of Frankenstein with their pitchforks and torches.
Son of Frankenstein or Young Frankenstein?
Well, Young Frankenstein is basically a scene-for-scene parody of Son of Frankenstein.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it is. I mean, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Kenneth Marr's character is the police chief with the wooden hand, the whole bit. It's Basil Rathbone. Basil Rathbone is Victor Frankenstein. Karloff is the monster. Bela Lugosi's Igor.
Wow.
And it's definitely worth seeing. It's one of the great, from that classic Universal horror era. It's probably the best of all of those movies. But I didn't know that at first too. I had never seen it when I was a child, and I had known Young Frankenstein for a decade or two before I saw Son of Frankenstein and realized it was kind of blew me away that it was basically scene by scene, the whole plot line with the fiance, the whole thing.
Huh. Even you made a yummy sound.
No, none of that kind of stuff. I didn't make a yummy sound. You did. Oh, you like it? You talking to me?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal. Yeah, before we get going, we definitely want to hear from you as to what is your performance rig and why you like it. So your performance setup from your pickups, your pedals, to your amps. We'd like to know why you play what you play and in what circumstances. Whether you're a church player or playing the VSW hall, we'd like to know how you do it.
Right on. Yes, please let us know in the comment section and the live chat if you're watching the premiere on YouTube. And you can always email us, support@mauricemusic.com. And let us know more specifically if you think it's long overdue that Spoon and I have done a gig together. I think the last time we played on stage was Martin on Main at the past Martin Fest. And I'll just say it right now so we have a legal record of it. I would like to play with you more than we get to, and it's a shame that we don't get to do more of it.
Well, thank you very much. I very much, I agree. It was fun the one time I was in Coaldale and we got to play some songs back and forth on the new Satin D28s and D18s and then played a couple of tunes together. We should think about doing something like that again, maybe with the SCs.
What does Friday look like for you?
Friday's a busy day, unfortunately, these days, but we can work it out, as Paul McCartney famously said.
If you listen closely, I hear a different song in the background. You know what the music means. We got to get out of here and play our gigs, plug in our pickups, and wow our audiences. But I want to thank everybody for listening. Another big shout out to our patron family. Really appreciate all your support. From all of us at Martins and More, thanks for listening.
Hear you later.